Hello everyone, welcome back to Hinterland Customs. This is another video that's also answering the question again on, I just did the video for the rat rod, and now again the question is, what is your most successful build? And it's got to be something that, you know, you met all your, that you completed everything you set out to do with it, and then I add on to mine is that it's something that exceeded my expectations. It does not have to be anything that won awards, which is fine because this one's hasn't really won many awards that from the shows that I've taken it to. I think it took second once, maybe to like a local show or something. But regardless, this was an absolute fun build, and this was a build that I had a lot of passion in this build. I really wanted to do a good job. I was really interested in the subject matter. This was not like something else up to this point that I had ever really worked on before. Of course, I'd only done one other tank build, and that one was fun too, and that required some research and stuff. But I wanted to build a rhomboid, and when I got into looking into them, I ended up starting this build on September 15th, 2016. That was the 100th year anniversary of the first time battle tanks were sent out to battle, and these were what they were. These were British Mark 1s, and I don't have the numbers in front of me because the numbers vary, because some people with numbers in history, they're like, you know, some say there was 59 built but only 39 sent out, and part of that too is because they used some of these tanks to haul supplies, extra petrol and stuff, so they dump the sponsons off the side and just seal it up or whatever, and then just load it full of supplies to follow the tanks out. So they kind of had these groups of three where there was like a pair of tanks going out to battle, and a third one kind of falling back in the distance to help them with supplies. Anyway, I looked through this different history and stuff, and I found a tank that was the first one to fire a shot, and that was Daredevil 765. So that's the tank I set out to build. You know, how did, what was I saying here? As I mumble along. Anyway, yeah, I can't think of what I was trying to say now. How is it my most successful build? I think what I was really trying to do here is replicate the scene that was going on that day. And with these tanks, it's very interesting. You can do it with any tank, but a lot of World War I tanks and World War II, you are building something that didn't last very long. You're not building something that the company's been around 80 years and half your country's driving it around to go get groceries with. You know, tanks were something that were in a limited production machine. You know, no matter what it was, I don't care what it was. It's all still limited production machine. And anyway, in this case, you know, we had less than 60 of these Mark 1s that were built. In this case, this thing made history, and it was only in the battlefield a few hours before becoming disabled and abandoned. That was another thing with them. You know, there wasn't a way to really fix them. If you could fix the engines, but if they got stuck in the mud or something, it was pretty hard. They didn't have anything to really tow them out with, and they're progressing. Like the war's going on. Like, we don't have time to pull this thing out of the mud. Let's go over here and help these guys advance. So anyway. The carriage wheels were no longer used. They're on the back. I love the look of it with the carriage wheels. I like it without as well. But yeah, the Mark 1 is a very unique machine. I also love the Rhomboids just because I always say they have no face. You know, they're all wall and the whole wall on the side, their profile, and the front of the tank is, you know, it's recessed back behind there. So it's not like tanks later with turrets, you know, where you have this piece and then this piece and this piece. You know, this was just one big rolling machine. And the sponsons on the side, which were great for strafing through the trenches. Anyway, I think one thing I wanted to do, again, was just try to recreate this tank in this scene for that time. As well as the terrain, as well as the two soldiers that are in this dio. The camouflage, I hand painted. I did not look at, I didn't copy it after anything I saw photograph wise. I think there is a photograph out there of Daredevil, but I'm not sure that I can see the camo that well because it's taken more at a front angle, I think. But there's several others that are, and you can kind of see the guy that created that camo was an officer in the British Army, but he also had a degree in art, and so he did it in what was called the Impressionist style, and with these kind of squiggly lines, and little every piece there's no really necessarily a straight line, and with the colors he used, I think we've got yellow and khaki, and then brown, green, and pink as well, and that's why you see pink on there. And so yeah, just trying to recreate that. I hand painted it. It was Tamiya paints. I wasn't sure how that was going to turn out. A lot of people detest hand painting something like this, but I wanted to hand paint it because that's what the soldiers did. They weren't out there with airbrushes. They didn't have it at the local car dealership getting fancy paint jobs. And honestly, their paint jobs look pretty damn good. Really look pretty crisp and clear and sharp for what I see, even in the black and white photos where you can see it very clearly, even though you can't see the colors. And so what I did was I just painted it very carefully, and I painted the shapes, and then I went back over and drew the border, which a lot of them would. I had a black felt tip pen, and I just drew the in between the border. Some they use thicker brushes, so the border is a lot. The border of the colors is much broader. There was others that they ran low on paint, I think, because there were a couple that have had this like light blue. It was like some brown stripes and then like a big blue blotch. I can't remember the name of that tank, but there was a couple like that. And there was also the Dracula tank, which had like lightning bolt looking lines all through it. Talk about Dracula at another time, but because that'll be another build for sure. But anyway, yeah, just trying to get the camo right. Just trying to recreate that scene. And I did a lot of reading on these tanks and the history. Sometimes the history overlaps. There's missing pieces. I finally got a book, and this was the book. This is like, I call it the Mark I Bible, basically. It's the first tank cruise, and Daredevil was in the Fleurs, near the town of Fleurs. But this is by Stephen Pope, and it's a pretty big book. It took him 12 years of research to put this together. And it's about the cruise and where they went afterwards and stuff. It's kind of about them, but it's also a great guide on these tanks. And there's, like here, he told me, I talked to the author and he said, it's not really meant to be a battlefield report. I'm like, no, you don't understand. This is awesome. You have maps of where these things went. There's D16, D18, D17, and all these different things. There's Delville Wood. And anyway, Longvall, if I pronounce that right, the Switch Trench, Hop Alley Trench. It's great. It's got all the farms. It's got all this great information. And I can take that with something like this, and I can create a story. I can just try to build it and imagine what it was like on that day. So, yeah, again, just trying to build a little piece of history that was very fleeting. It was here and gone, and they were moving on to make this tank better, and then later on they made the Mark IV, which I believe they manufactured over 1,000 of those. So Mark IVs are more well known, I would say, and if you see even stuff on TV and stuff, you'll see a lot of World War I movies. They'll have more of the Mark IVs going than the Mark I. But anyway, most successful build, yeah, by far. I feel like it really taught me a lot about how to glean through some of that history and trying to find what was important and what wasn't, and what you can find that's factual that you can just put together. I get into the tech stuff a lot. I love like learning, like these were air cooled, these Hotchkiss machine guns. They were Hotchkiss machine guns. They also had some called Vickers, but they threw these Hotchkiss ones out later on with the Mark IVs, and those were an oil cooled. I think those were the Hotchkiss. I think the Vickers was. I'm not saying it right. There's another name. Anyway, I've screwed it up. But the oil cooled ones were the ones they used later. And even though they were heavier and they were concerned, like, hey, I don't know if this will work or not. They're heavier because they're oil cooled, but they were shorter, so it allowed the soldiers to implement them in there more, and quickly, if one got jammed, they could take it out. They weren't having to back up into a hot pipe that was coming off of the engine. There wasn't a lot of room to move around. So anyway, a lot of fun. And again, this is kind of symbolic. I tried to make the Somme this, I just made all this ground as uneven as possible, and I have, you know, shell craters here, and this guy here, like this whole deal here, he was made for a diorama. It's a master box one called, I believe, Over the Top, and he's supposed to be hopping out of a trench, and I was like, well, this will be perfect. I'm going to have him hopping out of got a lot of dust on here. Anyway, I'm going to have him hopping out of the mortar shell crater. And there's, you know, this is a tree trunk, and it's burned on both ends, and a lot of burnt tree trunks from the blasts, and then fire, and artillery was just carnage. It's amazing. There was that was, you know, the artillery was insane. It really was. And it loosened up the earth a lot, and then when it rained, it was soup, and they had these big craters. Like one guy described, it was like being a ship on the ocean, because they just go up and down and up and down. Weathering wise, I think I did okay. Second tank I've ever weathered, so I felt some people thought I'd overdid it. I think it fits okay. You know, and again, like I said, a few hours, not sure exactly how it would have looked, but I know that when they were going out there, it was pretty messy, so I don't mind throwing a little mud here and there on it. Anyway, it was a really fun build. I've probably talked a lot about it and yammered on. But at the Bovington Tank Museum, they've got the only surviving Mark I. They don't even know which one it was originally, but they've got it there in a life-size dio, and this is kind of reminiscent of that. They've got two soldiers, at least two, maybe more, but I know they've got two soldiers kind of on each side. And what's important here, again, it's a symbolic thing for me, was showing that these tanks were made to support the infantry. There weren't any other tanks at the time that the Germans had. So, but even later on through history, and I won't get into this too much, but it's like people are always talking about tank versus tank type stuff. But tanks were, you know, yeah, in the beginning with this, they were meant to support infantry, and that's what they're doing here. It was meant to help these guys break through lines and get moving. And everything that happened during World War I with tanks was duly noted by multiple countries and implemented in training that ultimately led up to tank things going on in World War II. So that was another neat thing about the history, was seeing like, oh my gosh, I see these guys, they did this and they did that, and then it's like, oh, now I see why in World War II when it first started, you know, the Germans were doing this, and you see a lot of that. You see a lot of tie-ins there with training, research and development. Trial and error, right? It's just like life. You try something out, it doesn't work, you try something else different, and that's what's kind of fun about a project like this. So anyway, yeah, my most successful build for armor. This one definitely it was a build I was very passionate about, and it got me into learning a little more about tanks, learning a little more about diorama, and learning more on how to, again, just read through that history and find what works for you, what you can apply to your build to tell the story. So thanks for listening, and I will let you guys go. On the back here, I guess at the last second, I got a write-up of it, and I've got the names of all the crew members there. Captained by Harold William Mortimer. So long time ago. We've come a long ways in some of the technology for sure, but the old stuff's always fun. You guys take care out there. Hinterland Customs signing off.